Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning,
So we have to start with a new chapter today, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's begin then. Share my screen with you people. Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're gonna start. So we'll be starting the new chapter today. That is caste and reform. Let everybody join in. Fine, kids. I think everybody has joined. So the chapter which we'll be starting today is women, caste, and reform. Right, kids? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
good morning,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. So let's start from here.
Hello, children. We all know that the Indian society has undergone tremendous changes in the last 2 centuries. To understand this, we are going to first learn about the condition of the Indian society in the 19th century in order to understand why there was a need for social reforms during and after that period. Today, you see that girls enjoy equal rights with boys in the society. They jointly go to schools, colleges, and universities. They are free to do jobs. The laws of India ensure that women have all the rights regarding marriage and remarriage. They also have the right to vote. They can also hold official posts in the government. Though some women of poor and uneducated families are deprived of their rights, the general situation is improving. But this was not the situation about 200 years ago. At that time, girls were married off at an early age. Their husbands could also have many wives. Widows were being burnt on the pyres of their husband, and these
Kids, what do we used to call it when the widows were burnt on their husband's funeral pyre?
Sati, I'm Sati Pratha.
Very good,
Sati
Arushi.
Pratha.
Well done, girl. It was known as Sati Pratha.
Satis, meaning virtuous women, were admired. Women had limited property rights. Most women were uneducated, and it was believed that if they were educated, they would end up being widows. Having now understood the wide gender disparity in Indian society in the 19th century,
So did you understand? Matlab, this was, you can say, a stereotype that the people had carried at that point of time. Why didn't they used to educate the women? Can you tell me why? Just now he has told us why they did not used to educate women. Because they used to believe that if they educate the women, they will end up being widowed. That if they'll educate women and if the women will get married, then the husband is gonna die just because the lady was educated. So it was a stereotype which the people had been carrying.
Is it fair to say that this was the only kind of prevalent social difference in India at that time?
You tell me, around if we are talking about 2 centuries ago, so you're talking about 200 years ago. So was there only gender discrimination, or was there any other discrimination as well?
Ma'am, many other discriminations also.
Such as, can you name some, Mehul?
Child labor, which is now also, but not so
Child
much.
labor
Uh,
is no discrimination.
discrimination against.
Child labor is no discrimination.
Caste discrimination.
Yes, caste discrimination was there. Discrimination means treating a certain group differently, right? So there was gender discrimination and there was caste discrimination.
No. For besides these differences between men and women, Indian society was also divided on the basis of caste. Brahmins and Kshatriyas belonged to the upper caste. Vaishyas, which included traders and moneylenders, came after them. After them came peasants and artisans, both classified as Shudras. The bottommost category was classified for those who worked to ensure cleanliness in villages and cities, or jobs seen as polluting. They were considered untouchables by the upper castes. These untouchables had no right to enter temples or even draw water from the wells used by the upper caste people. They were considered to be inferior. Now let's understand what exactly happened in the 19th and 20th centuries to bring about changes in society. We know that in the early 19th century, the advent of newspapers, magazines, and pamphlets brought about a lot of changes. These mediums of communication spread information all over the country. Through these publications, people started getting to know about what was happening in the society. Much of the ordinary folk read and wrote different ideas through these mediums. Many issues, whether they were social, political, religious, or economic, etc., were discussed. These discussions sometimes could be linked to movements that advocated for social.
Okay, kids, here's a question for you all. In which century did the advent of newspaper, magazines, etc. help to stop social evils in India?
18th century.
In 18th century.
Ma'am, 18th century.
18th. Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. Let's see whether you're right or wrong. Wrong. Now, can you guess the
The 19th century. The 19th century.
Yes, it was 19th century.
Yes, ma'am.
So pay attention. No, just don't look at it blindly. Or don't close your ears. Pay attention to what you're being reading, seeing.
Change. The pioneers of change in the society were Indian reformers and reform groups. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one such reformer.
Do you remember Raja Ram Mohan Roy? Do you know him?
Yes, sir.
Have you read something about him? We have discussed this a lot in the class, in civics as well.
He was the prominent leader of Brahmo Samaj.
Yeah, he's the one only who started the Brahmo Samaj. And one
And
thing
he were in favor of Western learning. He were in favor of Western learning.
Okay, and he was the one who initiated a war against Sati Pratha. No, he was the one who fought very hard to ban Sati Pratha. Okay.
He established the Brahmo Sabha, a reform organization in Calcutta, which was later known as Brahmo Samaj. People like Ram Mohan Roy were called reformers because they tried to remove the unjust elements.
Can you tell me why these people were known as reformers? What is the meaning of the term reformer? A reformer is someone who brings a change. Understood, children? Somebody who tries to bring a change in society is known as a reformer. Okay? Am I clear?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Of Indian society and tried to persuade people to give up outdated practices.
Raja Ram Mohan Roy established Brahma Samaj in which year? Which in dash, which was later known as Brahma Samaj.
1830.
Sure.
Ma'am,
Are you sure, girl? Anybody else?
Ma'am, 1820.
What?
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
ma'am,
ma'am,
1820.
2020.
Ma'am, 1828.
1828. Okay, let's see whether you are right or not. Anji,
ma'am,
anybody else?
1830. 830.
1830.
1830.
Let's see that as well.
Ma'am, 1828.
Ma'am, सब जगह मैम नहीं 182.
Ma'am, 1828.
That's what we wrote earlier.
Ma'am, ma'am, 1828.
That's what we wrote earlier. It's okay. They're asking what which where which city. It's Calcutta.
Ma'am,
Here is a quick recap of what we have learned so far.
Okay, kids, that's what we have learned. That Sati Pratha and also other evils were there. Society was divided on the basis of caste, right? But change started coming in the 19th century. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one such great reformer who established Brahma Samaj in Calcutta and tried to remove evil elements from the society, right? So let's go to the next one now.
Dear children, we know that the women of 19th century India, unlike those of today, did not enjoy equal rights in Indian society. Their life was difficult. Hence, many thinkers and reformers came forward to change this condition. In this topic, we are going to talk about how the lives of widows were changed. It was Raja Ram Mohan Roy who first took action in this field. He opposed the burning of widows on the funeral pyres of their husbands and launched a campaign against this sati pratha. He tried to make the people aware through his writings that ancient texts did not approve any such traditions or customs. He was a learned man, having good command over Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian and European languages. The British officials paid attention to his words, as he was a reputed man. At this time, the British had a dislike for many Indian traditions and customs. Therefore, Sati Pratha was banned in 1829 with the efforts of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Later reformers also adopted Raja Ram Mohan Roy's strategy. They also took help from sacred ancient texts to prove that such practices were contrary to earlier traditions. Do you know about any such reformer who used this strategy to improve the condition of women in India? Yes, a very well-known and learned reformer, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, used ancient texts to prove that widows too had the right to get married, which was largely frowned upon at that time. British officials were also in his favor. Hence, a law was passed in 1856 that allowed widows the right to remarriage. But
Okay, kids, another question has come up. In which year British officials passed a law that allowed widows the right to remarry?
1956.
1856.
1856.
Sure.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
But since there were some people in society who were against this thought, they boycotted Vidyasagar. Nevertheless, the movement in favor of widow remarriage spread to other parts of India by the second half of the 19th century. An association for widow remarriage was formed by Vireshalingam Pantulu in the Telugu-speaking areas of Madras Presidency. Around this time, many intellectuals and reformers in Bombay also came forward for this noble cause. In the north, Arya Samaj, an association founded by Dayanand Saraswati, advocated remarriage. Despite all these efforts, this practice was still not accepted by the society in general. People did not accept remarried widows, and many such laws were opposed by the conservative groups of the society.
Okay, kids, again. Who is associated with the Association of Widow Remarriage?
Ma'am, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar.
Ishwar Chandra
Chandra.
Vidya.
Okay, let's see whether you're right or not. Now, who's associated with ancient texts?
Dayanand Saraswati.
Saraswati.
And Saraswati. Why is speaking in such a scared tone? Okay. Then who banned Sati Pratha?
Ma'am, Veera
Raja Ram Mohan Roy.
Ram Mohan Roy.
Arya Samaj was set up by.
Veera Saligam
Veera
Pantalu.
Are you
Salingam.
sure about this? See, are you sure you want to make some changes to it? Can you submit this?
Yes, ma'am.
You people have done it wrong. The stamp shall loaded. See, Dayanand Saraswati has set up the Arya Samaj. Raja Ram Mohan Roy has banned Sati Pratha. Then Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar used the same ancient text technique, right, which Raja Ram Mohan Roy has used. And Veerasingham Pantlu is associated with widow remarriage. Pay attention, kids. Please pay attention.
Here is a quick recap of this session for your better understanding. Students, we know that life was not easy for women in our country ages ago, and it still isn't. They were considered to be second-class citizens in society. But during 19th century, with the efforts of many leaders and reformers, women came into their own. But to enable women to stand on their own feet, it was important to educate them, to open their minds to more possibilities and give them more freedoms. Vidyasagar and some other reformers took initiative in this field. They started schools for girls in Calcutta and Bombay. But it was hard for society to accept this change. People felt that these schools might mislead their daughters. If girls were educated, they might dislike household work. People thought that while going to school, they would encounter the public and it might corrupt them. It was commonly believed that women were considered safe only within the walls of their home. Therefore, people who were a little liberal in their outlook towards women but did not like to send them to school arranged for private tutors for them at home. Several women who desired to gain knowledge educated themselves. Do you remember the name of Rashundari Devi, whom you read about in your previous session? She learned to read and write secretly at night under the light of a candle, as she was not allowed to read by her family members. Later, Arya Samaj came forward in Punjab and opened schools for girls. Jyotirao Phule did the same in Maharashtra. In North India, Muslim women of aristocratic families were taught the Quran in Arabic by women tutors at home. Reformers like Mumtaz Ali took help of the verses of the Quran and tried to make people understand that education was necessary for women also. We find that the first Urdu novels originated in the late 19th century. The message in the novels was to teach women about religion and house management. The Begums of Bhopal took a very important and active role in educating women in the 20th century. They opened a primary school at Aligarh. A school for Muslim girls in Calcutta and Patna was started by Begum Rokeya Sakhawat Hussain. She openly criticized conservative ideas, stating that all religious leaders considered women to be in.
Again, a question, kids. Arya Samaj came forward in dash and opened schools for girls.
Ma'am, 19th century.
Ma'am, 1870.
Better options are given down.
Ma'am, Punjab.
Sorry.
हाँ जी.
Ma'am, Punjab.
Are you crazy? Are you sure Punjab?
Ma'am, Maharashtra.
No, ma'am. Maharashtra.
हाँ.
Ma'am, Maharashtra.
I don't think you're right. Okay, let's see.
मैम हुआ तो मैम बॉम्बे में था वो, मैम बस मैं महाराष्ट्र दिया है.
Okay, then Jyotirao Phule did the same and Jyotirao Phule did it in Maharashtra, Baba.
Yes,
Ding,
ma'am.
ding.
Ma'am, Arya Samaj came forward in Calcutta.
मैं ज्योतिबा राव फुले did the same in Maharashtra.
Arya Samaj came forward in Calcutta.
Huh. A school for Muslim girls.
Ma'am, Punjab.
Yes, ma'am, Punjab.
Who is this reaper who's entering the class? Huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Who's by the name of Reaper? Then she openly criticized which ideas?
Conservative.
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 As much came in Punjab and Muslim girls in Calcutta then.
The gates of universities and colleges were then opened to women. They chose to be doctors and teachers as well. Women writers started writing openly on topics relating to women. We find a book called Stree Purush Tulna, written by Tarabai Shinde,
Very
in
important
which
book
she
it is.
criticizes the societal difference between men and women. Tarabai Shinde was a woman from Pune who received education at home. We cannot forget the initiative by Pandita Ramabai, a great Sanskrit scholar in this matter. She opposed those practices of Hinduism that promoted ideas supporting differences between men and women. The miserable lives of upper caste women can be seen through her book. She also established a home of widows at Pune. These widows were tortured by the family members of their husbands. Here, women were given shelter as well as training to earn their livelihood. But these changes disturbed the minds of Orthodox Hindus and Muslims. They feared that their family values and cultures would be destroyed by educating women. They might be westernized if they were educated. All these things make it clear that by the end of the 19th century, women had taken the reins of reformation and education into their own hands. They were writing books, editing magazines, opening schools and training centers, and forming women's associations.
Option A.
Ma'am, option A,
Pandit.
Tarabai Shinde.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, children. So option A is finalized.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
From 20th century onwards, they took a step further. We see that women had started to raise their voice against the laws that undermined their value. In this context, we may mention the right to vote that they were demanding. They also urged for better healthcare and education for women. They started participating in national and social movements. Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose and other such leaders supported their right to equality and freedom. National leaders assured them that they would also have their voice heard in new and independent India. Till then, these leaders demanded their active participation in freedom struggles. And it is important to note that this half population of the society played a significant role in making India an independent nation. Now, here is a quick recap of this session for your better understanding.
Did you get it, children?
Yes, ma'am.
You understood it somewhat?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So this is what our chapter is all about, right? That's what we're gonna read in the chapter. Abhi, for now, we talked about towards a change, right? That how change started coming, what was the situation of society initially. Next, we'll start with caste and social reform.
Students, during the 19th century, we see many changes in our society. The entire society was shackled in the chains of caste system. There was inequality in castes also. Then social reformers came forward to eradicate this inequality from society. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, a great thinker and reformer, translated an old Buddhist text and tried to make people understand that all men were equal before God. He was very critical of the caste system. The Prarthana Samaj, which was associated with bhakti, did not believe in the caste system and preached spiritual equality of all castes. Paramhans Mandali in Bombay tried its best to abolish the caste system in the Indian society. It is noteworthy that most of these reformers belonged to the upper caste. They tried to lead by example. Sometimes they took food with the lowest castes in secret meetings and did not mind their touch. This was done to remove caste prejudice from their lives. People then started raising their voices against the injustice done to the.
Okay, guys, a question had come up, right? Who among the following translated an old Buddhist text and tried to make people aware of equality? Yes,
Raja
sure.
Ram Mohan.
Ram Mohan Roy.
Sure, Mehul and Karthik? Sure? Say yes or no.
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
B.R. Ambedkar.
I like
Yes,
the
ma'am. B.R. Ambedkar.
BR
Ma'am,
Ambedkar.
B.R. Ambedkar.
Sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see. Do you want to try again? अब बताइए.
Ma'am,
Ma'am,
Raja Ram Mohan Roy.
yes, ma'am. Raja Ram Mohan Roy.
Sure?
Yes, ma'am.
क्या आ रहा? चलिए, continue.
The lower class. Christian missionaries made education accessible to the children of tribal communities and lower castes. These children were then able to make their own path in the changing world. We see that people had started migrating to cities in search of jobs. Factories and municipalities were offering them jobs. We know that cities were expanding and creating new job opportunities for laborers. Diggers, coolies, carriers, bricklayers, sewage cleaners, sweepers, palanquin bearers, rickshaw pullers were required to construct plant.
Do you know what हुआ है palanquin bearers? Palanquin पता है किसको बोलते हैं?
No, ma'am.
पालकी पालकी कंधों पे लेके चलते हैं ना जो. Got it?
Cities. The poor people of villages and towns, mainly people of low castes, served this purpose. Some of the labor class people also migrated to the plantations of Assam, Mauritius, Trinidad, and Indonesia. It was not easy for them to adapt themselves to the changed circumstances, but they felt it was better in comparison to the torture the rural upper caste landowners inflicted upon them.
Hmm. Tell me true or false. Christian missionaries made education difficult for tribals and lower caste children.
Ma'am, false.
True.
True कौन बोल रहा है?
Ma'am, false.
Ma'am, false.
Ma'am,
False.
false.
Ma'am, false.
मेहुल false or true?
Ma'am, false was गलती से true बोल दी.
Ma'am, false.
They made it easy for them.
We know that the Mahars were
Mahar was a community of the untouchables. Can you see the condition? This is all the condition where the untouchables used to live in. This is not this. हम पढ़ते हैं thatched huts. देखो ये जो पीछे हट दिख रही है आपको, पेड़ की डंडियों से, मिट्टी से, पत्तों से बनाई हुई है. Can you see
Yes,
this?
ma'am.
considered to be
Yes, ma'am.
untouchable, but they had job opportunities in the army in the Mahar regiment. Caste was also a blessing in another case. Leather workers faced discrimination as they worked with dead animals, which was seen as dirty and polluting. During the World Wars, the army required vast quantities of shoes. As most people looked down on leather work, the traditional shoe and leather workers could quote high prices and gain massive profits. For instance,
समझे आप
the
क्या बोला अभी? Did you understand? He said वैसे तो कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता था, राइट? जो लोग लेदर वर्क में इन्वॉल्व थे उनके साथ भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता था कि ये लोग अरे एनिमल, मरे हुए एनिमल के साथ के उससे काम करते हैं तो उनको भी डिस्क्रिमिनेट किया जाता था. बट दिस डिस्क्रिमिनेशन केम टू बी यूजफुल फॉर देम. हाउ दैट जब उस टाइम, जब वर्ल्ड वॉर के टाइम पे लेदर की बहुत रिक्वायरमेंट हो गई थी, व्हेन लेदर वाज रिक्वायर्ड इन ह्यूज डिमांड, ऑब्वियसली बात है उसका प्राइस बढ़ गया, डिमांड बढ़ती है तो प्राइस बढ़ जाता है. देन लेदर वाज सोल्ड एट वेरी हाई प्राइसेस एंड देन दिस इज हाउ कि और कोई तो लेदर का काम करते हैं एक्सेप्ट दीज अनटचेबल्स. सो दीज अनटचेबल्स अर्नड ह्यूज प्रॉफिट्स ड्यूरिंग दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, राइट? फिर से दिखाती हूँ.
World Wars, The army required vast quantities of shoes. As most people looked down on leather work, the traditional shoe and leather workers could quote high prices and gain massive profits. For instance, the father of B.R. Ambedkar, the leader of Dalit movement, was a teacher in an army school. Now let's have a quick recap of this session for better understanding.
Now we'll talk about some
Yeah,
important reformers, right? We'll go through it all now, then we'll read the book as well. उसमें भी आप यही सब पढ़ोगे, अभी अच्छे समझ लोगे तो बुक में हम जो रीड करेंगे वो आपको ज्यादा क्लियरली समझ में आएगा, ज्यादा अच्छे तरीके से, ठीक है? तो प्लीज पे अटेंशन.
that since ancient times, Indian society was divided on the lines of caste. But we also know that by the second half of the 19th century, many non-Brahmins began to oppose caste discrimination. They started demanding social justice and equality. In this topic, we will be discussing some popular movements and reformers of that era. One such reformer, Ghasi Das, who worked among the leather workers, organized a movement to improve their status, called the Satanami movement. There was also Haridas Thakur's Matua sect in eastern Bengal that worked among the Chandala cultivators. Grammatical texts that favored the caste system were questioned by Haridas. Similarly, there was Narayan Guru, a guru from the Eshava caste in Kerala, who proclaimed the idea of equality among his people. He discarded caste-based differences and advocated for common humanity. One of his famous statements was, Oru Jati, Oru Matam, Oru Daivam, Manushyanu, meaning one caste, one religion, one God for humankind. It must be noted that all these leaders belonged to the non-Brahmin castes. They opposed those lower caste practices that evoke the hatred of upper castes towards the lower castes. They tried to create self-respect among the lower castes.
Again, a question for you all children. From which state of India Narayan Guru from the Esvas caste belong?
Ma'am, Kerala.
Sure, Arav?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's go with your confidence. Absolutely correct. Good.
Having learned about these reformers, do you know who was the most famous of all social reformers that advocated for caste equality? Yes, it was Jyoti Rao Phule, born in 1827, who was the most well-known firebrand leader in this context. Having studied in a missionary school, he questioned the superiority of the Brahmins, who thought themselves to be Aryans and therefore saw themselves as superior to other castes. Phule's argument was that since Brahmins were Aryans, they were the invaders and foreigners who subjugated the true inhabitants of this country and saw them as inferior. According to Phule, people were the real landowners of the country. Phule told people that India had a golden period of history before the coming of the Aryans. Before them, the Maratha land was still and ruled by warrior peasants. He wanted the Shudras, that is the laboring class, and the Adishudras, that is the untouchables, to jointly challenge caste discrimination